Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Boundary of Disaster. We have been away for a while. We've got extra things to talk about because we've been away for a while. We're doing this one a bit ad hoc because the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, I think the Brazilian Grand Prix is now called for some strange reason, was a cracker. But I'm actually going to change up the running order because we've got a special episode out this week as well of Mr. Matthew Willis going to look at fast boats on Coniston Water, which is very, very good, and I highly encourage everyone to go. And Matt edited that one himself, which makes me even happier that we have another episode that I don't have to edit. But go listen to that one. Matt's done a brilliant job on that. We are here to talk about all things Brazil because, goodness, what a weekend. But, ladies and gentlemen, we have to start. We have Adam Berry with us, as we said, Matt Willis. Hello. We've got Ellie with us. Gorgeous George at the double. He made a sprint race interesting and then majestically won the Grand Prix, which I only watched half of because I was walking out of Craven Cottage after being robbed by Manchester United. And I walked into a bench and I've hurt my leg. So, yeah, there was a day. Ellie, what was your take on it? What was the sprint race like? What was your take on Gorgeous George being gorgeous? And is he gorgeous?
Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the sprint race.
I
was out.
Okay, who did watch the sprint race? I know Adam did.
I did, yeah. I thought it was really good actually for a sprint race. Me and my brother-in-law actually were having a conversation about it today, and we were saying how much better it would be if they could. I know that it won't happen because of the cost cap and all of that, but it'd be good if they could just drive those cars like it didn't matter if they damaged them, because then they would be great races. But
that's what we've got touring cars for, mate.
Well, that's true. That is true, yeah. Obviously, it was a massive but very pleasant surprise to see K-Mag on Kevin Magnussen on pole, which was something that I think most F1 fans would agree was quite a heartwarming thing to see, not just from his perspective, but for the team. It was inevitable that obviously he was going to sort of fall down the order gradually as the race went on. But he managed to hold his own for a few laps, I think, and he got an excellent start actually, which is a point worth making. But George was on fire, wasn't he? He had the bit between his teeth, I think, and the overtake and the laps building up to the overtake on Max were good driving on George's part, I think, and it was probably the most enjoyable sprint we've seen in F1 since they were brought in.
Matt, what did you think of it?
I'm not a fan of sprint races generally, but this one was in danger of proving me wrong because it was genuinely interesting. I think partly because we had the mixed up grid from the truncated wet qualifying, but also I think there's no doubt that that George he made that race. He went out and hunted Max down and wasn't intimidated by him and didn't allow Max's usual nonsense to either end in a crash or intimidate him. And he made the move, he made it stick, and then he drove off into the sunset. And I've been a fan of George since his Williams days, since his F2 days really, and I think it was plain from then just what a great driver he was and how he really is the real deal. But I think this really did prove it, because sometimes drivers come into F1 and they don't quite find that final couple of percent that maybe is in their potential, but they can't quite find it. But I mean, Georgie's driving like a champion. He's mature, he's fast, he's got his head screwed on, and as soon as he had a car that was worthy of his ability, he went and grabbed it. So it was a great little race. I found myself slightly regretting that with a mixed up qualifying that didn't get transferred into the Grand Prix, because the effect of the sprint race is sometimes that if you have a slightly unusual qualifying, the sprint race just goes some way to sort of resetting the normal order, which is a bit of a shame. And it did kind of happen a little bit in this race, but it was an interesting race in its own right. So that was good.
What's the socials been saying about George the last couple of days, Els? Because it's been kind of overtaken with what we're going to get to in a minute. She's shrugging. All the questions I'm asking her, I'm getting nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, she hasn't tidied her bedroom either, as we can see. So it's, as a father, I'm a bit disappointed in this.
I've had guests.
There we go. But from what I've seen, it's been generally positive. Everybody's been quite happy. We've had, F1 Twitter is sort of a strange place at the best of times, but we've had a bit of positivity for George, lots of negativity around what happened in the sprint with all the Alpine stuff as well. I have to admit, I've unfollowed a load of accounts because I just can't be bothered with it, which is weird for doing a racing podcast. But yeah, Adam, it's been nuts the last few weeks, and I apologize for using that expression, but it has been. What have you been seeing, Ellie, as our social media manager?
Well, not so much regarding the Ocon Fernando situation, except obviously Ocon's car catching on fire and everyone telling Fernando to retire for the 50,000th time.
I can get on board with that.
As can I. But what I've mainly been seeing on the socials is kind of things from the Checo Max incident and Lewis and Max once again, and Max telling Lewis that, or saying in an interview that it's stopped him from getting the win. All these things. So no, I haven't heard too much from the sprint race. But like I said, I've been pretty busy this weekend, so I haven't really seen. I was just there for the race. Lots on the Lando and Charles incident as well. It was a very interesting weekend for a great race. So
it was quite something. Like I said, I caught the second half of the race while I was getting my way back from Fulham. Gentlemen and lady, how would you have rated it? Because I thought this weekend was actually pretty good. Now that everything's settled and the parts on the cars, as Adam was saying, are mostly disposable now. With one race to go, what's everybody's take? Other than George winning, of course, which was just great, and everybody's happy about that.
It was strange, really, I felt, because it kind of felt like Max reverted. It's almost like he thought it was the first race of the year with his "I'm not giving back." What was it, 5th place? Like, I'm sorry, you've won the championship by a landslide. There is absolutely no way in which you need the points. Checo is fighting for 2nd place. He needs the points, and that was very strange. But I don't know. It was just, I was educating my friend on F1 on the race yesterday, and I thought it was a great one to start her off with, because there was crashes, there was incidents, there were safety cars, there was me screaming at the iPad for half an hour when they should have safety carred it, and they didn't, and they virtual safety carred it and yellow flagged and dilly-dallied with that. But yeah, I thought it was a really good one. I thought we've had a string of pretty boring races, so it was nice to have one finally that wasn't boring.
So it kicked off right at the start, and like Ellie was saying, it was like the good old days, or the bad old days, depending on how you want to look at it. Let's go round the table here. Adam, whose corners was it at turn 1 and turn 2? Because the Sun Necessities have always given us a bit of entertainment. What's your take on?
Are we talking about the Max Lewis incident?
What else is there to talk about? Let's face it. To be honest, looking at a lot of things, you wouldn't realise George Russell won a Grand Prix because of that.
Well, that is the downside. Is that everyone is talking about the Lewis and Max incident and the Max and Checo incident. There's plenty of people congratulating George, but I think the attention has been somewhat deflected away from George's win, which is a shame. regarding the Lewis-Max incident, as Mr. Willis quite rightly pointed out in our chat yesterday, if we go back to Silverstone last year, yes, I'm going there. If we go back to Silverstone last year, if that was Lewis's fault, then this one was Max's fault, because I don't think, whilst Max was at one point fully alongside Lewis going into the corner, I think that there was more than half a car's length between the two, and Max was sort of steaming in at a sort of greater than he should have been velocity. And as Boney's best friend Karun pointed out, and I should point out that we call him that because he blocked him on Twitter.
If he's pointed it out on Twitter, I have no idea what he said.
No, it was on the telly box. Well, it will have been on Twitter, but he pointed it out on TV. Was that, hypothetically speaking, even if Lewis just decided to completely bail from that corner, Max was never going to make the corner because he went in too quickly on the outside. He was right on the apex of the turn. He was going to outbrake himself. He was always going to overshoot that corner. So even if Lewis had given him space, there's a chance they would have collided anyway, because Max would have gone beyond his racing line. And then obviously with the post-race interview, when Max, it depends. It depends which way you take it, which I think depends on who you support. But it sounded like Max was back to his, yield or we crash sort of mentality when it came to that incident in particular. And what I find interesting is that for a lot of the season, Max has raced fairly cleanly with the likes of Charles, for example, and it has been good racing. But there is just something about those two when they race each other. Something always happens. And I don't know if it's because they both know that they're the best drivers in the field and they both want to be that little bit better than the other, or what, I don't know what it is, but it always seems to be that when those two race, something happens.
I'm going to be less generous to Max Verstappen, and this bit will probably get edited out of the program. I think there are various reasons why Max has been racing cleanly with Charles, and I think partly that's because the superiority of his car means he doesn't have to get quite so scrappy. I think the other factor is that Charles Leclerc is white and Lewis Hamilton is not, and we've also seen the way that Max treats his teammate, who is also not white. But that's the point, and I will leave it there, I think.
It's a take.
Yep.
As a mixed race person myself, that is actually something I hadn't considered before. And I don't know why. However, I haven't, so.
I don't know. I don't know. It's massively unfair, but I think there is something about the way Max races Lewis and something about the way Max behaves towards Checo that is not pretty. And I don't want to kind of go into huge amounts of discussion of that, but I don't want to kind of go into it anymore at all, really, having just sort of dropped that bombshell there. I think there is I think partly I don't think that ever left Max. I don't think the way he drives, the way he has this tendency to. I think we have seen this particular move all season, which is launch it round the outside, carrying huge amounts of speed, and hope it sticks. And particularly if you've got a left right or a right left corner, then throwing it down the outside, as long as you stay somewhere on the tarmac, it's going to give you the inside line for the second part of the corner. And it's what we saw at Monza in particular. And I think the only real difference between the Senna S at Interlagos and whichever chicane it was at Monza, was that there weren't any sausage curbs to launch Max into the air and onto the top of Lewis's car. And I think, Max was well off the circuit by the time the contact was made. He was driving across the curbs. There was actually a big runoff area there that he could have bailed out into, but he didn't because he's Max Verstappen and the corner is always his. I think he does this thing where he overdrives the entry to the two-part corner in order to claim territory on the second part of it. And to me, that's not good driving. That's just an extension of his usual aggression in place of skill. Make it clear to the other driver that it's their responsibility to get out of the way or there's going to be an accident. And, they may choose to, more often than not, and I think this is the fact with Lewis. Lewis doesn't drive like that, but he got to a point last year where he realised that you cannot keep giving Max Verstappen space because he'll just keep taking it, and he won't ever reciprocate. He'll just take that and take and take and take, and that will be how he races. And you can't put up with that as a driver, I don't think.
No, I mean, another thing we've got to remember, and it was rightly pointed out on Twitter a number of times today, and you'll have to bear with me, I can't remember the year, but there was the incident with Max and Ocon, when Ocon was in the pink Force India, as I think it would have been called then, where the roles were reversed, but the incident was almost a carbon copy of what happened.
Yeah.
Ocon went up the inside of Max, and Max ended up out of the race. I don't know if he ended up out of the race, but he ended up off the track, facing the wrong way. He
was lapping Ocon, wasn't he?
Or no, Ocon was unlapping himself.
Ocon was trying to unlap himself.
Yes, that's correct. And I've seen a lot of people argue that the difference between that is that Ocon should never have been in that position, but drivers are well entitled to unlap themselves. They are allowed to do that. It doesn't mean that Max, gets the right over that particular piece of tarmac because Ocon doesn't have the right to unlap himself. And Ocon, Max, after the race, as we saw, went and some might claim physically assaulted Ocon as a result of it. And there was all that, dare I say it, handbags over the incident that took place. But it was, if the argument is that Max had the right to go for that corner yesterday, then surely Ocon had the right to go for that corner in 2000 and whatever year it was when that incident happened, because they're identical incidents, really. So, it seems very much like, it's my corner if I'm the one trying to take it, but if it's not, then it's not a fair move, and that's kind of how it feels with Max.
Totally, but the thing that always comes to me about this, and when it's Max involved, is that he always has far more to lose, or generally speaking, he has far more to lose. Silverstone 21, he had more to lose from not actually making damn sure that he stayed clear of Lewis, and I know that was judged predominantly Lewis's fault, but predominantly means there is a share of that. A lesser share, but Max could have given more room just to make sure that they didn't collide, because he would have overtaken the next lap and he would have won that race.
Yeah, but he'd have won that race. Yeah, he'd have won that race.
And the race in Brazil went back when was it 2018, 19 maybe, when I was 18, I think, when he would have won had he just given Ocon a bit more space. China 2018. He did that, which was a race that Ricciardo won, but actually Max was ahead of Ricciardo and came up to Lewis. It took the first attempt to try and overtake, hang it round the outside, didn't have enough grip, lost, came off, and then Ricciardo's like, "Thank you very much," and then he made the move later and made it safely, and this is how it is with Max. He will never just sit back and think, I'll wait a couple of corners or I'll wait a couple of laps. It always has to be now, and it's just entitlement. And that hasn't changed. I don't believe that has changed. People talked about a new maturity this year. I don't see it.
I'm going to play devil's advocate in the room because I can. and I'm old, so I remember feisty-headed young drivers going up against seasoned old veterans, as some of us do. There's something about the worst Senna traits that Max seems to turn up to 11. Because Senna used to be incredibly impatient, especially late 80s in those McLaren years. I'm going to throw in 88 at Monza when he tried to just basically drive through Stefan Johansson and ended up getting beached on the curbs, which cost McLaren their perfect season. There's things like that eventually get worked out of someone. Do we see? I haven't seen any maturity this year because he's been too fast. He hasn't needed to be.
No.
But has anyone? Adam said no. Has anyone else seen something in him that's making us think that as a double world champion, he sees that he's got legacy to protect and records to chase?
No, I think, like you said, he's been too fast. He hasn't had a real challenge to see any kind of maturity, and he's proved that this weekend by sticking a wheel up Lewis's corner and recreating a nice 2021 and recreating a nice 2021 memory for us. So no, I don't think he has shown any maturity. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had an incident like we did yesterday, because he's already won the championship. Why does he need to be so aggressive? He can back out. He can take the hit, and it won't budge him.
Well, let me ask this question. I know it's not about his racing as such, but did he show maturity in the incident with Checo?
Absolutely not. I'm sorry, I think I said this on our group chat, that this is one of the most petty things I've seen since I was in an all-girls school. Is, no, he did this to me, he doesn't get this place, even though I don't need it. It's like taking the last biscuit when you don't even like them. It's just out of spite, isn't it?
It's eating all the bounties out of a celebration just so you can have the last one.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a seasonal joke for you, ladies and gentlemen.
But it's like, it's, talking about maturity, it's what, his 7th season in Formula One. Many drivers had or 7th or 8th even, I can't remember, but it's many drivers by now have well, I suppose he does have 2 championships under his belt, doesn't he? I think he's as close to the finished article as he's going to be. I would say, and I thought it was ironic, his comment in the Sky post-race interview when he said, "We're not babies," and I'm like, well, I'm going to need a little bit more supporting evidence on that, thanks, because it's just, this weekend is not. It was like, maybe it came as a bit of a shock to his system that he wasn't just able to go out and drive into the distance like he has been for most of this year, certainly since the first sort of half dozen races. And it really seemed to, but we've seen multiple, just listen to his radio messages. That is not his radio messages are frequently those of a child, honestly. I know things get emotional during a race and the adrenaline's up and everything, but it's I don't know. I'd be surprised if he turns into an elder statesman of the sport. In the way that most drivers do.
He did say something in that interview that made my eyebrows shoot northwards, which was, it didn't cost me anything, but it cost him the win of the clash with Lewis, which...
That's exactly what I was saying earlier.
Yeah. It's... Yeah, sorry, Bubs. Yeah, it feels calculated that if I put my car here, he's not going to give me any space because he doesn't give me any space anymore, but I've got nothing to lose. Until later on when he does have something to lose. Yeah.
Well, I think that's where, and we've talked a lot about this, and we were talking about it with Scott on Twitter, Scott Mitchell from Autosport, that
the race,
you have these rules. Beg pardon?
He's the race these days.
Oh, he's the race. I beg your pardon. Yeah. you have the rules and the guidelines that set out where a car can be relative to another car and relative to the corner, and they're trying to judge incidents on that kind of basis. And in this case, it felt like actually there was a huge kind of emotional thing between both drivers, but with all that history going on, and the fact that the Max drives in a certain way, and this happened, back in the sort of 2016, 17, 18, when he used to do this move of kind of, there'd be a car trying to overtake him, and he'd wait for them to commit to one side, and then he'd move. And it would be technically within the rules then, because the rule was you're only allowed to make one move to defend. And he was only making one move, but it was a late move, and it was a block basically. And they changed the rules to ban that. But it's like, he has this way of driving just with total aggression that I think the rules get to a point where they can't legislate for that, or they're always going to be behind the curve. And I think what you need to have is stewards, particularly the driver steward, who's looking at an incident and saying, was that a genuine attempt to make the place, or was that a kamikaze that was, we'll both go off if you don't move? I don't know. I think kind of things need to be simpler, but also more focused on, was that move ever going to really happen unless the other driver cooperated? But that's
well, I think Max answered that question himself, didn't he?
Yeah.
In his interview. So yeah, it sounds like we're spending an awful lot of time bashing Max Verstappen, which, judging what our schedule for the podcast is only going to get a little bit worse now, I'd imagine. Because we need to talk about that Checo thing.
Yeah, this bit was weird. By this point of the evening, ladies and gentlemen, I was in a lovely Italian restaurant. I had a glass of wine. I was starting to forget about 18-year-old Argentine strikers doing Lionel Messi celebrations. And then very quietly from my phone, which we had propped up on the table, comes the word that he's not going to give a place back to Checo, which is a bit weird. I believe at the time he was 3 seconds ahead of Checo.
4 seconds.
Was it a bit longer than that?
4.
Yeah.
3 or 4. Okay. And he refused to do it. Who wants to start this one out? This is just so petty. I'm a bit too tired for that. Go on, Els.
I don't even know where to start. I mean, it was made very clear to him, very, very clear, that you can overtake Perez to overtake Alonso, and if not, you have to give the place back. It's made very clear, and if whether or not he did say at the time and we just didn't hear, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to, or like whatever, or he just said, okay, copy, I don't know. But him not doing it after it was made very clear just seems so petty. And after Monaco as well, like, it was such a long time ago. And if he'd been holding on to that resentment since when was it, May? Well, April, something like that, then why now? Something must have happened. And something else I did point out is that a couple of days ago, I put this on our group chat, a couple of days ago, that Perez did unfollow Max. This was pre-race. So obviously something could have happened as well that we don't know about, that's then triggered Max not wanting to give this place back, because it was such a long time ago. Why now would he leave it? It could be something, there could have been something else, obviously, that we don't know about.
All that unfollowing news story stuff's far too Daily Mail website for me to care about, that people are monitoring that sort of business. I unfollow Matt all the time, but he never notices.
Something else I thought was quite funny is Max Verstappen's mum was getting involved on the Instagram debate with it, bashing Checo Perez for allegedly cheating on his wife after the Monaco Grand Prix as well.
And she went there, did she?
Yeah, she went there, adding fuel to the fire. So it was a very interesting time on the social media following the Checo Max incident.
The Verstappens are a lovely family, aren't they?
Yeah, first you got
Yeah.
Yoss
They give
stabbing a mechanic with a fork and leaving his son at a petrol station in a foreign country. And
They
then
make the PKs
his
look
mum,
functional.
which is laughable.
Yeah.
You just hope that union doesn't breed.
Imagine.
Anyways, okay, let's dig into this a bit more. If anyone can't remember May, there was an incident at Monaco where Checo put his car on provisional pole and then binned it on his next flying lap. I think it was coming out of turn 8. He put his foot down a bit too much, hit the barrier, and then was promptly hit by a Ferrari. Max was on a flyer, and if memory serves, it was a flyer of flyers, wasn't he? He was massively up on everybody.
It was a very impressive lap that he was putting in.
Anyways, red flags came out. They lined up 3rd and 4th on the grid, and then, as happens this year, Ferrari handed them the win.
Pulled out a masterclass.
Yeah, that was, even on Ferrari standards, Monaco was impressively stupid.
It really was.
Yeah. Anyways, after Monaco, after the alleged incidents with ladies of the night, Jos Verstappen wrote a very weird blog post on Verstappen.com where he basically said that they should have switched the cars around earlier. They were, holding his son back, yada yada yada. Now, by my count, it's been 6 months.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do we honestly believe he's been sitting on this for 6 months to get his own back?
He seems far too hot-headed to wait 6 months to get his revenge back. This is why I was saying there must be something else.
Yeah, but has there been an opportunity until yesterday for Max to, in inverted commas, get his revenge? Because, with the greatest respects to Checo, he went through a bit of a spell, didn't he, where he was, his form wasn't
Less
great,
than
if you want to call it
competitive.
that. Yeah. And he has come back to being relatively competitive. So is it literally a case of this is the first opportunity Max has had, bar just, smashing him off the track somewhere, to actually get his revenge on Checo? Is that why it seems to have manifested itself now? Who knows?
I think the fact that his blood was up from the incident with Hamilton probably played into it, and had that not have happened, then perhaps he wouldn't have been so truculent about it later on. I think he does strike me as the kind of person who bears a grudge. And it's also now coming to the point. I mean, six months ago, I don't think we were looking at a circumstance when Checo was likely to finish second in the championship. And now we're getting to the tail end of the season. Checo's form has come up quite significantly. Ferrari has just faded into nothing, pretty much. And Mercedes was too far back. So there's a chance that that Checo will quite a good chance that Checo will get second. And I think probably on balance he deserves it. But so I think only now is the situation where Max has something to hurt Checo with. And also I don't know. Part of me wonders if Max doesn't want Checo to get second because it makes it look like it was that his second championship was only about the car being good, or it makes it look like the car was more of a factor than Max's brilliant driving and stuff like that. So I think we know what Jos is like, and we know that Max just tends to get indulged by Helmut Marko and
because
Christian
he's their
Horner.
precious baby who can do no wrong.
Yeah. And so I wonder if Vettel is looking at all this and thinking that was me once. Danny Ricciardo is like, why did you never treat me like that? I won races for you.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here because we've mentioned the demon spawn that is Christian Horner. This was his statement about what had happened and what's going to happen in Abu Dhabi. This is the Autosport article. It says, it's something we discussed previously behind closed doors. The drivers have discussed it. So this is what's going to happen in Abu Dhabi. And as a team, our focus very much going into Abu Dhabi with Charles and Checo tied on points is to do our best that we can to support Checo to achieve second place. And Max has obviously made that commitment as well. Read between that line, dear reader. So as far as we're concerned, it's about looking forwards, not backwards. Asked about the situation played out on team radio, Horner said, I think it was probably a little less public than Ferrari's. Not exactly sure what he's going on about there, but we can come back to that in a second. Look, I think the thing is, this is dear Christian again. It is very clear going into Abu Dhabi as a team, we're going to do the best we can for Checo to finish second in the World Championship, and it's a straight fight between the two. They're tied on points, and whatever we can do as a team, and Max is very much part of that team, we will do to help Checo achieve that goal. As a team, and Max has made that clear as well, whatever we can do to achieve that goal as a team, we will. It is something that we've never achieved as a team previously, even in the V8 area, so it is going to be an exciting Abu Dhabi for other dynamics fighting for second in the championship this year. Horner declined to elaborate on what had transpired. Behind closed doors, that is.
I think he must be talking about the Sainz Leclerc incident at Silverstone, in terms of the so-called public incident with Ferrari. Where they tried to get him to slow down after the restart so that Leclerc could overtake him, which was, in my opinion, not very fair on Carlos at the time. I can only assume that is what he's talking about.
That's when Carlos had that beautiful line where he just went, "Why?"
yeah. Why? Why? Yeah, I can win. Why can't I win? The statement from Horner is very typical Horner, which is it always is with him, and I guess it is with everybody in the sport, which is saying what everybody expects him to say. He's hardly going to come out and say, Max is our number one driver and we want him to win all the time. But what I find most interesting about it is that Max's team radio alluded to it, and clearly Horner's statement pretty much alludes to it, is that they had prior knowledge before even the race weekend started that if a situation like this came, Max was not going to give the place back, which means that Red Bull have clearly struggled to talk Max out of that mindset. And, personally, I think that's kind of a dangerous position for the team to be in, where Max is saying, no, in this instance, I am going to do this. And no one at the team has been able to say, no, you can't do that. Because then all the power's with the driver. And as I said yesterday in our private chat, when you have that with a football player, you have a problem then. So...
See Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah. So, you have to wonder how far back does this go? Does it go back as far as Monaco? It sounds like it might do. And how is it that in that space of time, the likes of Horner and Helmut Marko haven't been able to level Max out on it and say to him, no, in that instance, the team comes first?
Well, I think if they weren't going to do it when Max collided with Ricciardo at Baku, and caused quite a dangerous high-speed accident by chopping across the bows of Ricciardo as he was coming through on the inside with a massive overspeed, then I don't think they're going to. This is small fry compared to that, to my mind, and they made it very clear back then that they weren't really going to do anything to challenge or punish Max in the way he drives and the way he is. So I just think, it's and that team, has form going back to the Vettel and Webber days of not reining in their drivers when they really need to. And this monster has been years in the creating, and they're not going to change its nature now.
No, this is exactly what happens when you overindulge someone. They have allowed Max to run the show. They have allowed him essentially to make whatever call he wants with no consequences. And this is what happens. It's like overindulging a child. There has to be a line. There has to be boundaries, and they have not put those in place with Max, with his teammates, which is proof of all of the teammates he's had the last couple of years.
Is this partly makeup of the team, isn't it? They've always pushed one person forward. It was DC in the beginning, then it was Seb, then it was Danny, now it's Max. It's they've never, as far as I can remember, they've never really had a united front when it comes to their drivers.
Well, I think the other big issue that it causes is what that's going to do to Checo next season. Because
I'm going to enjoy that.
Because there are going to be times where they are going to have to ask Checo to do Max a favour, and he might not be quite so willing anymore to do that. So they've got some difficult management ahead of them, I think, in the off season with their drivers, and they may just get to the point where, in instances like this again, they're just going to have to let them race each other, because otherwise.
Yeah, and they also don't have the situation that they have had on occasions before, which is there's nobody obvious that they can replace Checo with if he becomes unmanageable during the season. And they've just got rid of Gasly, who, to be honest, would have been the best choice for that. What are they going to do? Put Tsunoda in the car? Good luck with that.
Well, if Danny Rick is their reserve driver for next year, there is always that option, but you can tell they're not going to do that willingly.
Yeah, that would be the last in a long list of options, I think, putting those two back together again. He's got with Danny with something really to prove.
They're still friends, however, I don't think their friendship would survive being teammates again.
I think the friends thing's always overrated. I think the respect thing is more, and I think you can look around the sort of paddock and you sort of see how how Toto has managed his drivers, even in the fallout of the Nico and Lewis days. There was always some level of respect. Even with Bottas, there was respect. And I think with George and Lewis, with Lewis taking the lion's share of the weird and wacky testing this year, there's definitely a level of respect there. But anyways, I think we've flogged this horse to death. And
there is just one more point I want to make, which is
there really?
There really is. But which is just how toxic some of the commentary about this has been, and how it's kind of it really has shown up the worst elements of toxicity in sort of F1 fandom social media these days, which is, actually coming from traditional media, because it's traditional Dutch media that have really been playing on this story that Checo deliberately crashed his car in qualifying in Monaco and admitted such to Helmut Marko and Christian Horner,
I did see that.
Which means that we either they're kind of making it up to justify Max's crappy behaviour, or someone is, or we actually have a situation that's not unlike Crashgate from all those years ago, in which the team bosses knew of an incident where a driver had deliberately crashed their car, and obviously we saw, Charles came up behind and nearly T-boned. It could have been very dangerous. So if it was done deliberately and the team knew about this and have kept it quiet, then that's a serious issue in my view. Whether it, but then there's also there's also the toxicity of it, and the fact that there's no, I don't know. I just think it's really bad that professional journalists have been putting this kind of thing about, and obviously now people have been taking it out and spreading it, and I think that's kind of crossed a line that I'm not sure we've really seen crossed before.
Well, let's be fair. What else have the Dutch got to go on about? Yeah, they didn't qualify for the World Cup, did they? So they're bound to be bored for the next 6 weeks. I'm just looking at Twitter, and let's see what's trending. Another Brexit, hooray! Let's look forward to that. Lewis Hamilton, of course. Lewis with lots of tweets. Hamilton with lots of tweets. Margot Robbie looking like she desperately needs a burger. And of course, Max Verstappen. It's a shame, because I'm going to bring this back to a couple of things I just want to raise before we go. George was everything we've come to expect from George, and he did it out in front. He was being hunted down by Lewis after the restart. I thought he left the restart too late, because he literally didn't go until the safety car line. And Lewis was just sort of sat there ready. I thought he got just enough away until Lewis had to back off because he cooked his tires. Yes, we can say that Mercedes messed him around with tires again, but I just thought he managed the whole thing very, very well. And I was just dreading another, was it Bahrain last year when it all conspired against him? It was great. Now, two things popped up as I've been sitting here. A driver who I really like is apparently about to be announced for Haas. So Nico Hülkenberg, the Hulk, is returning to Formula One. Yeah. Which I like Hulk. He's a safe pair of hands, but again, it's another seat to a young up and coming driver who's not gonna get a shot. And I don't mean Giovinazzi coming back again. There should be a better seat for that. And there was one more thing which I can't find. Oh yeah, it was the little clip of Lewis and Timo Glock on Sky, which has been doing the rounds.
Yes.
Now that, because the thing is, I remember that race. I'd given up on it, and I was walking out of the room when you just hear that Glock slowing down, and Lewis catching him going to the last corner, which was brilliant. And it also gave us the greatest moment of seeing Mass's dad going absolutely apoplectic and then being told his boy wasn't world champion. It still makes me smile to this day. But Lewis said something at an interview which was amazing. Glock said, "Is that do you feel the same about 2008 as you do about 2021?" And Lewis said, "Somebody made a decision last year. What happened in 2008 was racing, because it was a fuel flow problem on the Toyota. Glock just sort of died a death, didn't he?"
It was just racing gods, Ben, wasn't it? It was completely different. It was an odd question, I thought, personally.
But to be fair, the fact that Toyota had lasted that distance last year, but that year was something, because that was a terrible car. But I thought I think we're at peak Lewis not giving a damn anymore, because he's kept his counsel for a year. Yes, he said some pointed things, but usually in those sorts of things, he just tries to put it behind him. I thought that was very interesting. Did anyone else watch it?
I saw that clip. It, yes.
Yeah, saw that clip. I got the impression that somebody maybe asked Glock to ask that question. I just don't know why an ex-racing driver would think that was a good question to ask, because to me it just didn't make sense. They're not remotely comparable in my eyes. So maybe someone said, "Ask that. That'll be interesting. Lewis's answer will be interesting," and that's just kind of how it went.
I mean, it was the fact that it was a championship won by a very small margin on the last lap, or almost on the last corner. So I suppose there was that very superficial similarity, but the circumstances of it was just so utterly different that it just felt like a weird comparison.
It was nice. I don't know if it was in the same interview, but it was nice of Lewis to say that he considers Massa a champion, because for all intents and purposes, Massa did race he raced a champions race that season, and he would have deserved it if he'd won it. So it was nice for Lewis to say that, I think.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he stood up in his seat, and I do feel quite sad that he didn't get the title that year. Although, you know, I do think that Lewis deserved it, and you know, it's you know, it was really one of those years when both drivers deserved it, and you know, if you could have awarded two titles, that would have been lovely. But in the fact that Massa never got another shot as well is sad. But yeah, no, that is, you know, Lewis is just class, isn't he? It's when it comes to things like that.
Yeah. Others will tell you differently, though. But let's not get on to that now.
But yeah, this is we got to wrap up. I've got a dash, but that's the thing that, you know, there's was it the Michelle Obama line, when other people go low, we go high, and that's Lewis, isn't it? It's he, you know, in my memory, the only time I think he's made a knowing slip is the Ali G line in 2009. That's I could be just sort of being roasted into glasses, but I think that's the only time he's actively said something silly. It was coming from a place where he probably had a point, but it was ill judged, and I think he's said the same thing since better.
Yeah, I mean, it was just the way he said it didn't help his cause, and I think, you know, he probably acknowledges that, and it's that it was counterproductive. But, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell him that he didn't have a pretty good point back then, and, you know, with the way things were back then with Bernie as well, and it's just, you know. But yeah, I agree. But he's you know, come a long way since then. In you know, as a driver and as a man, and I think it's I think just his kind of maturity, and he's been really quite zen this year, and I think I actually really look forward to see what we get from him next year, because I think he's probably going to be on another level. That's my gut feeling.
Yeah,
but, you know,
I think he's revitalised. His season's given him an opportunity to reflect a bit. You know, he's like I say, he's revitalised. I think another thing with Lewis is that it proves, you know, it's fairly clear that for the earlier stages of the season, when his results weren't great, he was focused more on getting the car right than he was getting results. He was letting George be the one that went and drove the car, without thinking of that side of things. But again, it just demonstrates his ability, I think, to understand the car well enough to help the team make the changes that will make the car better, which people who worked under him at McLaren said he was capable of doing. And obviously, when he first moved to Mercedes, when the car was not very good, they make the same comments about that period of his career where, you know, his input was very much what made the car what it was. You know, and I think that season's demonstrated again just what an in-depth knowledge he has of what makes an F1 car work, to try and pull that Mercedes back from being what some people have referred to as a tractor, to a race-winning car.
I'm actually astonished that they've got to the point where the car is that good on pace. I didn't think they were going to get there this year. I thought it was written off.
No.
I agree. I thought it was a bit of a long shot as well, but they've done it, and they've done it very well. Yeah,
the only sad thing from my point of view is that there isn't more races left now, because I don't think anyone will beat Red Bull at Abu Dhabi. I think that's a Red Bull track. There's lots of fast sections, and it just would have been nice to see Lewis win a race this season and break another record, but he can't have them all, can he? I suppose.
I'm with you guys. I think it's him biding his time. You know, he's saying he's got another 3 years. They're talking about.
I think he said 5.
Well, there was a contract discussion they were going about that. I think they were saying it was.
Yeah,
it
I
was
think he
3.
said he could do 5, but I think contractual wise they're looking at 3, aren't they? I think so.
But he doesn't need, his legacy is set in gold, but he knows if he can win another championship against the likes of Max, George, Charles, Carlos, this group of young kids, I think, is the best crop that we've had in Formula One in a long time. And I think he knows that if he can, after what's happened, bounce back, grab the 8th, make that win tally a little bit, make it 115, for example, and then go off and do music. He's playing banjo on somebody's new album, apparently. So
Wow,
man of many talents. I mean, I look at drivers like Alonso, and he's a bit of a love-hate character. People have got their opinions on him, but when his car's good, he can still do it physically, and he's how many years older than Lewis now? So, and Lewis, with the greatest respects to Alonso, probably keeps himself in much better shape. So, I mean, he should still be able to do it for at least a good 2 or 3 years more, I think.
I mean, even it's quite telling. Even with all that focus on the development of the car that he obviously had, particularly at the beginning of the year, he has not been destroyed by George. He's not been, he's very much, George has been brilliant, but he's very much held up alongside George. And when you look at sort of times when sort of Vettel, after 4 straight championships, and then had that terrible season where Daniel Ricciardo just ran rings around him. And it does often happen with champions, particularly when they've had several consecutive championships. You can't keep that level of intense effort and focus up, and a young driver comes along, and it's sort of a bit like Hakkinen against Senna at times in '93 was noticeably quicker, and quite surprisingly quicker at times. And it was just the fact that Lewis has managed to very much maintain his performance against George, I think is actually, even while I get the sense of biding his time, working on the car, and kind of preparing himself mentally for when things are competitive again, I think, so who knows what will happen, but I'm expecting to see a really strong Lewis next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We'd better let Boney go and get sweaty and out of breath for half an hour, because he needs to.
Hopefully it'll be a bit longer than a half hour for what we pay for it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Major Laser's new track that Lewis is playing banjo on, so be sure to get that on your Spotify playlist. And yes, we're not going to leave it so long. Like I said, 2 episodes this week. Our very own Matthew Willis talking to some fascinating boaty people, and a few racers there that I think I'm going to be looking at, because that seems like you had far too much fun up in the Lake Districts, Matt.
It was really, really good. Yeah. It was just an amazing event that is really not nearly enough well known, and just fascinating stuff. And I'm going to try and get out to see some of the actual circuit racing this year as well, because that could be really entertaining. And you're
team
not going to
outing.
get me away from boats now.
Team outing for that one, I think, mate.
Totally.
Right. Thank you very much, Matthew Willis. Always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Adam Berry, looking very dapper in his newsboy.
Pleasure as always.
And Ellie, it's always nice to see you. Ring me more often. It's nice to hear from you from time to time.
Yeah. Nice to see everyone as well. It's been a minute.
Super. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been The Boundary of Disaster. Until next time, do take care of yourself. Thanks for sticking around and listening to this episode of Boundary of Disaster. Please, if you can, like and subscribe, leave us a review, because that would be amazing. It helps with all the algorithms, and that means people can find us a little bit easier. Of course, if you can tell your friends as well, you never know, they might start listening to us as well, which would be ace. If you fancy supporting us, there's a Patreon page. The link is in the description. Also, check out the other links. We've got a link tree there that goes to all of our socials, including the new TikTok, which Ellie has got up and running, and the rest of us still don't know much about. So, Until next time, thank you so much. Bye.